Hello Summoners and welcome back to another episode of ProGuides Best Champions to Main, now on patch 10.20. These champions are all about high performance with low ban rates that are unlikely to get nerfed in the immediate future. These are the most reliable picks in the game that are the most worthy of investing time in. But before we get started, today's question of the day is, which team do you think will take it all the way in Worlds? It's still early on, and there are some really unexpected results, even in the first couple of days of play-ins, so honestly I have no idea. Let us know what you guys think down below. I'd love to see what you guys think. And before we begin, if you guys want to climb to gold or higher this season, make sure to go to ProGuides.com. There's a ton of skins that you can get, as well as some extra benefits by getting gold this season. The end of the season is coming up, so make sure to sign up for ProGuides and learn from the best. Starting things off in the top lane, we're going to be talking about Singed. While Singed himself is a pretty strong champion, he also has the added bonus of having a completely unique playstyle, so that honestly no one knows how to play against him. In lane, his poison gives him some of the quickest pushing power around, and even lets you do some of the proxy farming techniques that really help you climb. But make sure you guys know your limits before you start going crazy between the enemy towers. His W's grounding effect can stop all the mobile top laners from both chasing or escaping from him, and once you get good at the combo, flipping enemies into the puddle for the resulting root pretty much guarantees kills when your jungler comes for a gank. His ult is what makes him such a monster, especially in the mid game. The mega mix of stats gives him the damage of a carry, the durability of a tank, and enough movement speed that you can't really escape or lock him down. When you get to the teamfight stage, your goal is literally to run around and be annoying. Fling can be used to peel enemy engages or dive the enemy backline and disrupt their main DPS. Spread your poison to everyone you can, and when the enemy turns to give you a bit too much attention, just use your passive movement speed to zip out of range. Next up, Kayle is pretty much the definition of what a hyper carry should be. She has a very weak early game with power that slowly ramps up until she becomes very strong in the mid and late game. Being fed isn't enough, you need levels to carry on Kayle, since she is hard gated by her passive. While level 6 unlocking her ranged auto attacks makes her playable in lane, her real power spike is at level 11. By the time you reach this passive upgrade and acquire your Gunblade, the AoE auto attack should give you unmatched split pushing power. Her Q serves as her main wave clear in the early game, but at later stages the resistance shred, high damage ratios, and slow make it a potent dueling ability. W's heal can be a nice bit of sustain, but due to the high mana cost, you don't want to spam it for HP. Instead, its main use is for the movement speed it provides, allowing you to kite and chase enemies as you need. Ease on hit damage synergizes super well with the Nashors and Ginsus you'll be building later in the game, giving you insanely high DPS, with the active being a low cooldown execute. And to round everything out, Kayle's ult is incredibly strong in teamfights, but don't think it's just there for protecting Kayle herself or a squishy carry. It can be thrown on whichever teammate is diving the backline, since it not only protects the ally, but does a huge amount of damage once the swords come flying down. If you'd rather play a solid brick wall of a tank instead, then Poppy is the girl for you. While she's good in a variety of situations and can be pretty flexible with her builds, she is especially good into AD-heavy enemy teams, with her kit making her incredibly strong against the AD melee champs that are usually played in the top lane. Her passive's ranged auto combined with grasp can even make her a lane bully. Her Q is her bread and butter as a laner, with the AoE smack being good for wave clear, short trades, and even lengthier fights, since it pops for a second round of damage on enemies that choose to stick around. Her W is one of the best utility basic abilities in the game for shutting down both engages and escape attempts, with it not just stopping dashing enemies, but completely grounding them when it does. This means that champions like Riven and Aurelia may as well be silenced when you catch them with a well-timed W. When it comes to using your E, don't just brazenly charge in constantly. Wait until your target lines up on a wall to stun them, then pop them with Q, an auto, and walk away. This short, bursty trade deals a ton of damage and leaves the other lane unable to even trade back. Mastering Poppy's ult is the most difficult part of her kit, but it's important that you do master it. A well-aimed, fully charged Poppy ult can mean a free Baron steal for your team, or can be crucial for splitting the enemy team in a team fight. Other times, you may just need a quick tap of the ability to briefly CC an enemy for your team to pick them off. Next up, we're moving into the jungle. If any of you guys are interested in climbing the ranks as a jungler at the end of this season to get some of that free LP, we have a ton of resources on ProGuides to help you. Make sure to go there and check it out. Vi's been in the S and A tier for quite a while now, but she'll still be pretty low in the pick and ban rate, so make sure to abuse her before others catch on. Her passive gives her free sustain as she clears and can make her deceptively tanky in fights. When it comes to using her Q, make sure that you're aiming to hit enemy champions, not just close the gap. That's a very new player mistake, since it's the ability you max first and it actually does a ton of damage. With the rest of her kit, you'd expect Vi's only purpose to be to find and assassinate squishy targets, and she's really good at that, but her W's huge percent of max HP based damage and armor shred let her melt other bruisers and even tanks, making her one of the best dueling champs in the game during the mid-game. Her E's AoE Blast helps apply Talisman's life-leeching effect to AoE jungle camps, with the empowered auto also being a huge portion of her damage in skirmishes and teamfights, since it resets her auto attacks and helps proc Triforce constantly. Once you're 6, look to use ult to gank for allies with CC or high damage for guaranteed kills. Once it's mid to late game, you can group and ult any overextended carries you see to force skirmishes or even full-on 5v5 teamfights. But don't be afraid to play the more pick-based style, going to side lanes and looking to assassinate squishies or immobile champs farming on their own. Like Vi, SKARNER has also been on our list for a long time, with the back-to-back buffs he got earlier in the season pushing him to the top of the jungle pool. The key to making SKARNER work is pretty much always fighting on your spires. Without them, you're missing out on a lot of attack speed and movement speed. Q is pretty much all of your damage, with the constant AoE giving you a quick and healthy clear, and the ultra low cooldown helping to proc Triforce's Spellblade passive constantly. W's shield gives a lot of added durability, but the better part is the movement speed it gives you, which gives you the ability to catch up to your targets. While his E's slow is already strong, you want to try and auto every target marked to get the full effect of stunning all the targets you can. Sure, it can be tempting to tunnel on one carry, but when your ult is down, the best thing you can do is to go around and stun as many enemies as possible and just be as disruptive as you can. And of course, to add to that disruption, your ult's point and click suppression gives you the ability to completely shut down whoever you want. Just be wary of the enemy's inventories. You don't want to waste your ult on someone with QSS. SKARNER falls into the category of champs that has pretty much no mechanical skill, so instead you rely on correct pathing and decision making. This means that no matter how good your mechanics are, you can climb if you have a good idea of just where to be and when to be there. If you want some more help figuring that out, go to ProGuides and find your coach. While the previous two junglers take some time to scale up and be strong, if you want a jungler that can decide the game in the first 5 to 10 minutes, then look no further than Rek'Sai. Her early game pressure is immense, with even a slight overextension by some enemy laners, meaning that you're basically going to get a free kill. Her passive provides a bit of sustain, so you can even stay on the map a little bit longer and pull off those ganks. Her unburrowed Q gives her nice AoE damage for clearing camps, as well as giving her empowered autos for melting opponents during ganks. While burrowed, Q instead becomes a missile that can help seek out targets, revealing them when hit, allowing you to scout out death bushes and sneaky Baron attempts. W's knockup gives Rek'Sai some of the best point-and-click CC in the game. All it takes is positioning behind an enemy and right-clicking them to pull off ganks, and when paired with a teammate's CC, this usually means a guaranteed gray screen for the enemy. When you're just prowling around while submerged, make sure to keep an eye out for the enemy footsteps. This can give you valuable information in places you can't safely put wards. Unburrowed, E's Bite is just a finishing blow in your combo, so just make sure to use it after you max out your rage bar, since it doubles in damage and becomes true damage at that point. When burrowed, E's tunnels are what give you so much ganking strength, for two reasons actually. One, they allow you to bypass walls and gank from weird angles, even against enemies that are barely outside of their own tower range, and two, due to the ability to bypass terrain, a solid network of tunnels lets you traverse the map extremely fast. You can invade the enemy camps, and with the right tunnel setup, be on the other side of the map pretty much in seconds. While your goal is to have a decent lead in the early game, once you have your ultimate, it just makes your job of killing everyone a lot easier. With skilled use, you can use your ultimate to projectiles or drop turret aggro during a dive. Now looking to the mid lane, while he's traditionally more of a top laner, KENNEN mid has actually been doing very well with this new specific rune setup. Electrocute gives him some insanely bursty trading, and he's still able to be a teamfight monster with all of his AoE damage and CC. To get the most out of KENNEN with this setup, you want to aim for small trades around his passive stun and proccing Electrocute. When both aren't available, play a little bit more back. His Q gives huge poking power, allowing you to punish your laner when they get a bit too aggressive. W's passive empowered auto can add some trading power as well, but the main use of the spell is when comboing its active with the rest of his kit to add on a stack of his passive while dealing some pretty big AoE damage. While you can use E to go in for aggressive trades, you should be a bit hesitant to do so every time the ability is up, since it's also your only escape tool. Instead, play it safe until you're either getting a gank from your jungler, or just farm up until it's time to teamfight, since that's where KENNEN really shines thanks to his massive AoE ult. Using E and Protobelt to get to the top of the enemy team just so you can activate your ult and W is a huge deal. You get so much damage, and you also lock them up with your passive stun. While he's most popular in the support role, Vel'Koz mid is no slouch either. The extra gold from having a lane all to himself makes him a mage that can melt entire teams. Not even tanks are safe thanks to his true damage passive. In lane, his Q can be an annoyance, with the skill shot coming in from awkward angles and poking down the opponent, but out of lane it becomes much more deadly, with just 2 or 3 hits, putting enemies so low that they have to reset. And seeing as he can ult almost a screen away, this alone makes him such a great character for controlling Dragon and Baron fights, or when his team is sieging turrets. W is your primary wave clear, so don't go too hard trying to use it to poke down your opponent in lane. Save the poking for your Q. Your E's CC makes it valuable as a defensive tool since you're immobile. Having this up when you're being ganked is pretty much mandatory for you to survive. However, it can be used when going aggressive as well, since landing it guarantees you also to hit your Q and W to proc passive. Just be mindful of your position in lane before you start throwing your E out carelessly. You do not want to be pushing into the enemy tower without E up. And what turns Vel'Koz from a poke or combo mage into a teamfighting monster? Well, that is, of course, his ultimate. The Death Laser can melt entire teams in seconds if they are caught up in it, and when empowered by his passive, the true damage even pierces through the tankiest of targets. It just takes one good fight in a choke to turn a close game into an easy win. Before we talk about the champ, I'm going to be pointing out the build. Yes, there are 2 lost chapter items in here, but don't knock it till you try it. Seraph's gives you a defensive shield and practically endless mana, while GLP gives you a slow for peeling and catching with Glacial, making hitting bombs completely effortless. On top of that, the 2 items along with Transcendence and Cosmic Sight give you a 45% CDR, so give it a try. If you still hate it, just replace Seraph's with Rod of Ages. Alright, now let's talk about what makes ZILEAN great. For starters, he's not your traditional mid laner. Instead of carrying games himself, ZILEAN exists to enable allies. Sure, you can hit some huge double bomb stuns, but those are almost a bonus when you look at the rest of his kit. His passive lets you take an ally that already has a lead and puts them even further ahead with the free XP. His bombs are his only damaging ability, and as a result, they pack a pretty big punch, with 2 of them giving almost instant wave clear. His E is what makes him so great at enabling allies. Can be great on offense and defense alike. Hecarim ready to engage? Well, speed him up and send him in. Jinx getting run down by the enemy? Well, speed her up so she can get out. And that's just on allies. When it's used on an enemy, the slow is crippling. Once you factor in ZILEAN's W, the last 2 abilities are seemingly endlessly spammed, with constant speed ups, slows, and stuns being thrown out left and right. In an extended fight, you'll really feel the influence you're having on the pace of the battle. And if things get bad, and you or an ally are about to die, your ult will set up whoever it is for a round 2. Okay, now for the bottom lane. We're going to be starting off with the ADCs, leading with JINX. Her passive makes her arguably the best hyper carry in the game, with the insane movement speed and attack speed letting her chase down and mow down any enemy in the area. In the early game, using Q to swap to her rockets gives good pushing power, but in team fights it's the range and splash damage along with Hurricane's cleaving auto attacks that give her such insane damage output. Her W and E serve kind of the same purpose. The slow and root can be used when escaping ganks or aggressive lane opponents, but both can actually be used when going in with a more aggressive support. Don't let her hyper carry label fool you. When paired with a champ like Leona, Jinx has some nasty all-in power. She can very easily snowball hard with a lead. Whether it's to finish off opponents that barely escape in lane, snipe an enemy in another lane, or go in for a clutch Baron steal, Jinx's ult, when used right, can have some explosively satisfying results. While Jinx can be a lane bully, if you'd rather a champ that is always dominant in the bottom lane, maybe Misfortune is more your style. Her passive makes her the queen of short trades in bottom lane, with the extra damage making you really strong in 1-for-1 auto trades, but as a trade-off, your extended fighting is actually pretty lackluster. The key to mastering MF is learning to hit her Q off of minion waves. In the first few levels, the poke can be very annoying, but once MF has even just a BF sword, the ability can start to hit hard. Against squishy targets like Sona, just a single Q can bring her down to under half HP. Her W's passive movement speed lets you move in and out of your enemy's range for quick trades, while the active's attack speed gives you some high DPS later in the game. But early game, you want to generally keep your trades short since you don't have that much good damage in longer fights, as we talked about earlier. E's slow can often be underrated. Not only is it good for just walking away from ganks, but throwing it out on the enemy when your support is ready to go in makes hitting skill shots a lot easier. And in the later stages of the game, once you start putting more points into it, the slow ramps up to a disgusting 60%, giving a pretty decent zone control. And while E makes enemies slower in an area, your ult just lays them out dead. Takes some patience and good positioning, but once you line up for that perfect ult, you'll just watch your enemies melt in seconds. If marksmen just aren't quite doing it for you, or your team is in dire need of some AP, give VEIGAR a spin. His kit combines some strong utility with crazy ramping hypercarry levels of damage. This of course is due to his passive just letting him infinite stack AP as long as he has minions to farm. With that in mind, make sure that's what your focus is on in the early game. Your main goal is to farm, 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 and only fight when it's a good time for you. Use your W to soften the waves up, making it easier to hit with your Q. E's cage is multifaceted in its uses. In lane, it can actually be used to set up great engages, and it can be used as a great disengage tool as well. Out of lane, it can be used for picks or as massive zoning tool in team fights. Once you max it and have capped CDR, it becomes an insanely broken ability in extended team fights, with constant stuns going out, making it easy to set up your enemies and knock them down. And what would a burst mage be without a single target nuke of an ult? In VEIGAR's case, that ult is also an execute, meaning that it's best off being used when the opponent is low. Although once you have enough AP, you can practically insta-kill anyone with GLP, Q, and R. Two quick tips for VEIGAR. First, when it comes to using spells on enemy champions, don't even bother trying to hit W on its own. Instead, follow up on an ally's CC or your own cage. Second, like with all mages in the bot lane, don't just go super aggro early. It's really easy to go and you won't have the damage to go for all-ins in the first few levels, so heavy trading will just result in you being and against ADCs with their hard-hitting autos and generally low mana cost, this means you could completely forfeit lane. Remember, you want to stack your passive. That's your goal in the early game. So play it slow and wait until at least a lost chapter to commit to fights. And for our last few champs, we have our supports. We'll start things off with GALIO. His mix of heavy CC and pretty decent damage make him well suited to laning with aggro ADCs like Lucian and Tristana. His passive gives him the unique advantage of being a melee support with free AoE damage for pushing in waves, or can just help add some punching power to his trades against the enemy. His Q pretty much doubles down on both points, with it being very helpful in shoving in waves and providing some light poke. The real value in GALIO's kit, of course, though, is his CC, starting with his W. Not only does the taunt force the enemy to hit him, but since he takes reduced damage, it's basically a guaranteed one trade, if not a kill, when he taunts the enemy bot laners. His E gives him a quick way to engage fights, but can also be used to retreat when things are looking bad. If you time it right, it can even buffer CC and dodge skill shots. And to round out his kit, Galio's ult can have a huge impact in teamfights. Not only is it a massive zoning tool that either forces enemies to leave the area or be knocked up, but the magic shield it grants allies can completely negate the ults of champs like Cat, Vlad, and Karthus. Just remember it has an incredibly long cooldown, so make sure you're using it when it counts. Another engaged support, Alistar, is also popping off lately. While he can definitely provide some peel for allies, there are better champs for filling that role specifically, and Alistar, like Galio, is best paired with aggressive ADCs. His passive gives a constant stream of sustain, which helps when you're against double-range champs that may be trying to poke you out. Once you and your ally are in a good position for a fight, you want to look to engage bot fights with your WQ combo for an instant knockup. After you do, activate your E to trample your opponent, following up with the empowered auto attack stun after it ramps up. This combo may be basic, but it works, and any squishy bot laner caught by it is pretty much guaranteed to die as long as your ADC follows up. In the bot lane, that combo is really all there is to trading, since it'll be early game and you won't have super long extended fights to give you time for a second rotation to come in. But in team fights, there will be a little bit more to it. You want to look to disrupt as much as possible after your first engaging combo. Sometimes that means staying on top of your ADC, peeling threats, and at other times it means going on to the enemy backline, headbutting their carries away to remove damage from the fights. Regardless of what you're doing, keep an eye on incoming damage, and use ults when you think you're going to be getting hit the hardest. Remember, you aren't Tryndamere. Your ult is meant to block as much damage as possible, not to be used when you are at 1 HP, because then, well, it won't save you. And our last entry for this patch is going to be NAMI. Of all the enchanters, NAMI is the best pick if you have a preference towards lane domination, thanks to her poke and sustain. Her passive may just be a simple bit of movement speed, but it can enable carries to close the gap when going for trades, or it can help to skip away from danger. Q can be used for some aggro plays, but be careful before you start throwing it out. If you're laning against aggressive engaged supports and you use your bubble carelessly, they may use the cooldown window to go in knowing you can't stop them. W provides a huge amount of sustain and poke all in one spell. It's pretty costly though, so make sure you're getting max value out of it by getting in at least one, if not both, bounces out of each cast. E makes your trading even more dominant whether you give it to yourself or your lane partner. The extra damage is guaranteed, and it slows, making it easy to hit a Q or whatever skill shot your carry has to throw out. And lastly, Nami's ultimate. This ability can have a huge impact. Not only does it apply her passive at double strength, but it's also an AoE knockup with a fat slow attached, making it great not only as a defensive tool, but also as an offensive one. Its main use in lane is going to be disengaging either the enemy bot lane or incoming jungle ganks, buying time for you to escape to tower. In team fights, your options open up a bit more. While it does retain its disengage abilities, it can also be used offensively to follow up on your own allies' engage, or even as an engage tool itself. Alright guys, that is it for our top 3 champs to main on patch 10.20. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thank you guys again so much for the recent support. I hope you guys all climb to your desired rank at the end of the season, and I hope you guys enjoy Worlds. It's going to be a great one. Hopefully NA goes far. Great seeing you guys again today. Hope to see you in the next one. That's it for the video. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck in your next few games, and I'll see you on the Rift.